All right, what's up, everybody? Thank you so much for joining us on the YouTube. Am I 50? Did I just say that? On the YouTube. Thanks for joining us on the YouTube, everybody. Appreciate you being here. Thanks for tuning in and being a part of our conversation tonight, where we are talking about the spiritual discipline of dealing with your past. I'm joined in the studio with a live audience. You guys say what's up? Yeah! All right, now I just want to prep us for the conversation tonight because I know that tonight the topic is, it's a spiritual discipline, and the reason that we call these things that we've been talking about over the past 2 months spiritual disciplines is because there's things that are found in the Bible that are not necessarily easy, but they are foundational for your spiritual growth, to help you be with Jesus, become like Jesus, and to do what Jesus did. So it's a discipline. It's not going to come natural. It's not going to come easy, but it is something that we need to do because it is something that is going to help us do all those three things that we just said, right? Okay, so I think the first thing for us to know for the conversation tonight is that I'm going to give a little bit of a background, but then the majority of tonight is going to be a little bit different from previous weeks. The majority of tonight is going to be questions. I feel like we've gotten a lot out of the questions. You guys are great leaders, and great leaders ask great questions, and you've been asking amazing questions, and it's helped us have really great discussion over the past few weeks. Okay, so here's the thing that I'm gonna kind of start off with. Okay, every single person in life. Okay, I don't care what background you come from, who you come from, what you come from, where you come from. We all come from something. And something in our past is good, bad, ugly, right? So it's funny because Jesus and God has intentionally designed our lives where the promise of God can be fulfilled in our lives through relationships. But relationships are often the things in our past, if we look back at our past, are often the sources of our most deep hurts and wounds, right? So the one thing that I'm going to say to stage our conversation today is that a wound that is not revealed is a wound that will never heal. A wound that is not revealed is a wound that will never heal. The enemy wants you to think that your past is so awful, so bad, that you can never bring it up, never talk to anybody about it. And he does that intentionally because he knows that if you'll keep it hidden and you'll never bring it into the light, then God can never show you where he was in the midst of that memory, that pain, that hurt. And that's the plan of the enemy in your life. Okay, so we got to make sure that we're encountering our memories in a healthy way. And so I'm actually going to walk you through how we should do that, okay? There's three things I'm going to say real quick. I want you to note them down, and we're going to do this super fast so we can have a lot of time for questions. I really want to have a lot of good conversation around this topic tonight. So the first thing is that we always want to, like I just said, we want to be careful with how we approach our memories. Because for some of us, our past, we talked about that before, our past is fine, we came from great parents, great family, we had some monies, we were cush, it's it is what it is. That's something to be grateful for. It's not something to think oh, I just can't relate. You know what I'm saying? It's no, that's great. You were blessed to have an amazing family, and that's fantastic. Maybe your past pain didn't come from your family, though. Right? So maybe it came from a friend that you thought was a friend, but really turns out they weren't a friend because they betrayed your trust, they hurt you, they stabbed you in the back, whatever, okay? Other members of the people in our community, online and in this room, we have some stuff in our past that's really difficult, and it's really traumatic, it's emotionally, physically, whatever, abusive, and we don't ever want to let ourselves go back to that memory. And it's I don't even want to bring it up, much less think about it. I don't want to do that anymore. So we do have to be careful, and I think there's some big things to know. The first thing to know is that, and I know I said I'm going to give you three things. I promise I'm getting there. But the big things to know is that you should never go there alone. Okay, so you should never let your mind wander into that memory or whatever just by yourself. Okay, you should process that with a counselor or with some therapy or pastoral counseling or whatever. So that would be a good thing to do, but will also be a good thing to do is to, this sounds so cheesy, so you just have to forgive me, but go with me. You have to go there with Jesus. Okay, so you can't let your mind go to a traumatic pain, past hurt, past experience, past relationship. just for the sake of just going there. Like, I mean, because sometimes the enemy just distracts us with like the guilt that came from that scenario or the condemnation that came from that scenario. What we want to do is we want to intentionally step into, okay, what are some things in my past that are holding me back? And I'm asking this question: where was Jesus in that moment? Where was Jesus in all of that? Like, that's really going to help us set us up for success as we kind of talk about this, okay? So here's how we do that. 3 things. Number 1, event. Just write down event. E-V-E-N-T, event. What is the event? And I would even say that it'd be really good to, you can't just do it now, but like, spend some time and let the Holy Spirit bring situations, memories, or whatever to your mind that you didn't know was holding you back, but is holding you back. So God, what's the event that I haven't dealt with, that I need to deal with, that happened in my past that I haven't told anybody about, or I've suppressed it or whatever? And what is that thing for me? So like, I can remember moments where in my childhood growing up, I've done this practice before, and I was specifically reminded, y'all, it's so funny. I actually was talking to Michaela about it, my wife. For anybody who's online doesn't know that, that's my wife. So I was talking to her one night after we put the kids to bed. We were sitting there, we were just talking about life. And she started counseling about 1.5 years ago, and it's like one of the best things that she's ever done. It's really helped her kind of go through this process of dealing with your past, right? And so I started telling her, I was like, man, maybe one day I should go to counseling, because I just was reminded of this time today where like this, and this happened. And I told her about some of the stuff that had happened like in my childhood, growing up. And she was like, babe, what? She was like, that is not okay. Like, you should go to counseling. And I was like, really? Like, is that bad, But it's so funny because like there were some things that were pretty traumatic in my past that like I tossed them up like they were no big deal because, I had suppressed them. I hadn't really, dealt with them. But a lot of any Enneagram fans in here? Okay, only like 2. Sweet. Tyreek in the back, my man. But a lot of it is like, it talks about your childhood wounds, and that kind of produces the personality that you have today. So it's kind of like that's like what you experienced that wounded you in your past is why you are the way you are today, kind of thing. So it's like it kind of plays into that a little bit. And I was reading my Enneagram, and I was like, dang, that really makes sense. Like, yeah, I was messed up as a kid, So it was just funny, to kind of work through those things and even just like have God bring some things up, very gently bring things up and just kind of say like, hey, like you need to deal with this. Like this wasn't okay, this happened to you, but more than you just pushing it under the rug, I want you to not believe the lie that was produced out of that moment anymore. I want you to believe the truth about where I was in that scenario, right? So that's a big deal. So event. Second thing is emotions. Emotions. Probably one of the biggest hindrances that we have when it comes to dealing with our past is we are ashamed or afraid or feel guilty for the emotions that are produced by that memory. And I think that we just have to realize, and if you don't realize, you need to, I'm helping you to realize, that whatever your emotions are, whether it be angry, happy, sad, mad, whatever, your emotions are okay. I think some people in the room need to hear that. As you deal with the stuff in your past, your emotions are okay. Emotions are not right or wrong, but they do exist, and we have to recognize that they exist and not just suppress them, right? So emotions. So what emotions were produced out of that event that you're thinking about? So that event that happened in your past, whatever God brings up in your mind, what emotions were brought up because of that thing, right? So emotions. And then the third thing is response. What is the response? And response is a little bit of a vague word for that third topic or that third idea. So I want to clarify that a little bit. Not so much how did you respond, but how did your life change from that moment on? And even more clearly put, what lie did the enemy produce in your life in that moment that you've been living by ever since. So what was the response? Like, how did your life change after that moment? And here's another thing, is that maybe there are some memories in our past that are really, really good. Okay, so this is not all just bad stuff. Obviously, the bad stuff is the first thing that comes to mind. But some stuff in our past was like really, really good, and it helped shape who we are today. Like, that's fantastic. You know, I think when I think of the stuff over the past 3 years, I think 252 over the past 3 summers has been some of the stuff over my life recently that has really helped shaped me as a leader. And so it's like, you know, for some of us, we look back and we're like, man, there's not really a whole lot of bad stuff that jumps out, but there's this really few great things that come out. It's like, okay, well, like, what is God trying to show you through that? You know, like maybe there's more of that thing that God's trying to produce in your life. And maybe there was a truth that was produced. Maybe there was a half-truth, or maybe it was a lie that the enemy tried to put in your mind from something bad. Okay, so we got to kind of evaluate some of those things. So those are the 3. Okay, so those are the 3 things that we kind of need to work through and evaluate as we're dealing with our past. Okay, so I'm going to start off asking y'all a question, and then y'all can ask all your questions. Sound good?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what do you think... no, I'm going to go more simple than that. Why do you think that we should deal with our past? Like, why do you think it's even worth going back and, like, dealing with your past? Any thoughts?
To reach freedom.
Right. I mean, that's it. John, what were you going to say?
So, like, not to hinder your future?
Not to repeat it.
Right. So all those are great. So, but it comes back down to what Chloe just said is like to reach freedom. Because if you're not walking in freedom and you are living, so what a lie does is a lie takes your thought life and your spiritual life captive. So it's like, for example, it's like the example that is kind of thrown around with this topic often is the example of a baby elephant. A baby elephant has a rope tied around its leg. They chain it to a little bitty twig in the ground. And when it's a baby, it's walking around that tree, and that's all it can do. I mean, it can't go anywhere else because it can't pull the tree up, right? It's not strong enough. But as that elephant grows over years and years and years, it comes to be like this 2,000-pound animal that's massive. And it could easily snap that twig out of the ground. But it never does because it's grown up believing the lie that is its full potential. And if we don't deal with our past, that will be what is true with us, spiritually, emotionally, relationally. If we don't deal with our past, we'll be hindered and repeating mistakes. We'll talk about that soon too. And we ultimately won't be walking in freedom. And Jesus, John 10:10, what did Jesus come for? Jesus came so that you may have the fullest life imaginable and nothing less. And if you're walking in a life that's not free, then that's not the life Jesus had for you. So that's a perfect, freedom is that's the answer. All right, does anybody have any questions before we get into anything else? Any questions? In the back, okay.
How do we acknowledge our emotions without getting wrapped up in them?
How do you acknowledge your emotions without getting wrapped up in them? I think that's the battle, right? I mean, that's kind of the thing. It's like I don't even want to go there because my emotions are going to overtake me, right? I mean, that's kind of the thought. How many of y'all have that thought? Yeah, everybody in the room, right? I mean, that's the battle. So how do you do that well? Any thoughts? Any suggestions? Anything that's worked for you?
Do it with somebody?
Yeah, we're talking.
Do it with somebody? Okay, so what does that look like with you?
I don't know. I mean, like, for an example, like, maybe just talking to, like, Caesar, or, like, for me or Caleb, like, the older guys, we can just go to them with it, and they can kind of help us through it so we respond to it and not react to it.
That's great. Man, that's such a big key. Responding, not reacting to your emotions, and doing it with other people helps. People that are a little bit older than you, a little bit ahead of you, can kind of help, so your mentors. That's great. Yeah, well, Clay, what'd you think?
Just like a therapist or counselor.
Yeah. So at some point, maybe it's like, okay, I should go see counseling. This is maybe more than just a 2 or 3 conversation. A lot of things in life are that, and that's fine. But then there are some things where it's like, no, you should probably walk through a process to really, figure out, how this impacted your life and get free from that. So that's great. Yeah, John.
Like, how can you tell the difference between, like, acknowledging your feelings and, like, just, like, clinging on to something and, like, it tearing you down?
So I think it's a lot of what what was just kind of touched on there. So he asked, how do you deal with your emotions without getting wrapped up in them or them kind of overtaking you? And then you're asking, say your question again.
So like, how do you like? Hold on. So like, how do you make sure that you're not like? I can't even think of it anymore.
We're talking about clinging on to it.
Oh yeah. So like, how do you know that you're not clinging on
Clinging on to it, right?
to your emotions, like clinging on to like the problem that happened rather than
Right.
just acknowledging your emotions?
Okay, so this is where I think the connection between the two is. Okay, so how do I not get wrapped up in my emotions but deal with them? How do I not cling to them and like, how do I get free from all that stuff? So I think here's the connection between both. Is that when you go talk to somebody that is a spiritual mentor, so like, your small group leader or, your small group coordinator or myself or whoever, you go talk to somebody and you can process that out with them. Any good small group leader or pastor, like, and this is something that I've learned being here under Pastor Jonathan and Pastor Allen, they do this better than anybody, is that if you sit down with me and you processing a thing that happened in your past and you're trying to process the emotions and all that kind of stuff, what often causes you to cling to your emotions or kind of be wrapped up in them is the lie that is associated with it. So it's like, if I feel guilt from this event that happened in my life, it's probably because there was something that happened that produced insecurity in me that said I'm not good enough. So I don't ever want to go back there. So it's like helping you understand that your emotions are okay. And verbally, me pointing out in the conversation what is a lie from the enemy and helping you replace that with the truth of God will really help you be freed from that, that tug of war of like, I'm clinging to this thing that happened and like I'm, struggling with this event or whatever. And the same thing, so it's what Adam said, helping you respond and not react, and help you realize like what might be causing a reaction that's not really, it has no really foundation. It's just like, this thing happened. It's okay to be mad or upset or whatever from that event. But here's what God says about you, and just to really help you hash out that conversation. I think the key is just don't do it alone. I mean, if you find yourself constantly going back to a memory and getting wrapped up in those emotions, it's probably a really good red flag that you need to go talk to somebody about it. And maybe it's just one conversation, but still, you need to go talk to somebody. Yeah. So I think those are great questions. Yeah.
So I know that a lot of people have had really good past, and the devil will try and use that against you. So how do you deal with guilt from having a good upbringing?
Yeah, so I feel like I've actually had a couple conversations with someone very specific about this, but they in their situations, this may not be true for everybody, so I can't really put a blanket statement out there, but what was true for this person is that they felt guilty because of their past that was good, because they felt like they had an inability to relate to people that were struggling, right? But the perfect example is Jesus. Like, he lived a perfect life, had everything, like he never did anything wrong. There was no guilt in his life at all. Like he didn't do anything that could have produced guilt. And so, for him, though, to be able to relate to people, it wasn't the idea of, I've racked up this tallying score of the bad things I've done in my life, so that means I can relate to people. Really what it should be is a very, because honestly, like, and I'm not gonna get too much into this, but honestly, that's kind of a form of like false humility, which is pride. So it's kind of like, okay, how do you deal with that? So really, to put both ends of the spectrum on a level playing field is the verse that says we have all fallen short of the glory of God. It doesn't matter how great or how awful your past has been. Sin is sin, and you were born into it, whether you like it or not. Yeah. And so from that point in itself, you have every grounds needed to relate to somebody and to say, hey, we are in equal need of a Savior that died on the cross to save us from our sins. Because he paid for all sins. He didn't pay for it was a package deal. You know what I'm saying? Like, it wasn't just 1, 2, 3. Right. It was a package deal, and he died for you and he died for me. Hey, that's bars, you know what I'm saying? So anyway, I think that just really helps level that playing field.
That's good.
Yeah. All right, John.
It's not John, it's Austin.
Austin, oh my gosh. Y'all are sitting right next to each other. You gotta not sing next to each other. Okay, all right, Austin.
Is there any event that you think will be too small to not even have a conversation about, even if you keep coming back to it?
I think if you keep coming back to it, just have the conversation. Yeah, I mean, I think that God's very intentional in that. A lot of people don't understand that the thought life, like literally, like Romans 12:2, 252 students, we learned this first day of our internship, is that like that the taking control of your thought life is how you as your whole being is renewed and made into a new, I mean, like that's how the process works. So you could even say that the spiritual warfare that happens in your life, the battlefield is your thought life. Like that's where it's all going on. You know what I'm saying? So I think that if that is true and the devil is very intentional in putting lies in your mind to believe, then how more intentional is God to bring things up continually and try to help you recognize, man, I got some things I need to deal with, you know? So especially if you're asking God, like, hey, bring some things up. I want to walk in freedom. I want to, and that should be a continual prayer because you never know what he's going to bring up, you know? And so I've had some things where I was hurt more in a passing comment down the hallway of high school than I was in a fight that I had for 3 weeks with my best friend. You know, the enemy is so strategic like that to make you think it wasn't a big deal. But, you know, that's tricky. So if it's coming up, you know, talk to somebody about it for sure. Yeah, okay, Nathan.
If someone came to you and had a conversation like that where they're talking about their past, what are some practical ways that you would be a part of that conversation and be helpful past just being like empathetic?
Yeah, so I think that's probably the biggest way is to point out lies of the enemy. So I think that a lot of times we've worked the narrative so much in our mind that what happens, oh my goodness, this is so good. So what happens when a memory or a wound is not brought to the light is that it starts festering, and what that does is it creates a narrative in your mind that you begin to work your whole life around. And that's very dangerous. So it's often very easy when somebody brings up something that happened and you're talking about it, it's normally very easy to say like, hey, like, this is the lie and this is what the Bible says. And really, like, that's my whole job, is pointing out the lies of the enemy and what they've believed. And honestly, like, most of the time, they don't even know they're believing it. It's just like, I didn't know I was living that way because of that, but that makes a lot of sense. And that's why it's a very grace-filled and like hopeful conversation, because it's like, okay, you've had the courage to come talk to me about it. Let's talk about it, and let's see where the lies are in your life, and let's replace it with the truth, what God says. You know, it's like super easy. Now, practically beyond that, I'm going to make sure that I'm always giving them a next step. You know, you want to make sure you're pointing them to Jesus. So like, a dangerous situation would be if you guys went to go talk to a small group leader or me, and then you unknowingly started to pair a person with your healing, when that is never the case. That should never be the case. Right. So that person should always be pointing you to the healer, you to the counselor, right? The great counselor. So pointing you back to Jesus, like, hey, go be with Jesus, read your Bible. Like, let's figure out together some verses, some passages that are going to help you, reveal a piece of God's character that you need about this scenario or whatever, or point you to the truth yourself, in the Bible. Sometimes I'll even say like, hey, I want you to go read about that, and then we'll talk next week, and I want to hear what you found, and then just kind of help them self-discover, the truth. But beyond that, practically, I'm going to point them to their small group leader and help make sure that they have a next step. Like, are you in life-giving community where you can keep having these conversations on a weekly basis? Because I can't have it with every student, but your small group, that's what they're there for. So I'm going to point them to a small group leader for sure, or their small group. And then beyond that, just make sure that they're doing everything else that they can to be in life-giving community. Because I think that's where life change happens in the context of relationships. So I think that where a curse was spoken by one relationship in your past, a blessing can counteract it just as easy in the future, just from one person that you're sitting with in this room. So I think it's really, really important. Is there anybody over here? Any questions? Yeah, Trey.
How do you deal with your thought life?
How do you deal with your thought life? Anything more specific?
I'm trying to think, just blank. Like, how do you take control of the negative, thoughts that the enemy's putting in your head from those past experiences and fill them with truth?
Okay, that's a really great question. It's a fantastic question. Man, that's great. That's such a good question. Everybody give it up, Trey. Good job, Trey. Okay, I'm going to ask everybody first, and then I'll give my answer, my thought, at least. What do you guys think? Like, how do you think you know when a thought comes into your head that's from the devil or that's from God? Like, how do you know the difference? Okay, you.
You can pray about it.
You can pray about it? That's true? You could? Clay?
If it aligns with like the Bible.
If it aligns with the Bible, right? What if you don't know the whole Bible?
Well,
Read the whole Bible.
Read the whole Bible, memorize the whole thing. But that is good. That's a good pinpoint for sure. If you know a verse that it contradicts, well, that's an easy telltale sign. Like that's not from God, obviously. Okay, Adam, what do you think?
To like figure out whether it's like maybe conviction or if it's the devil trying to like persuade you to do something.
Okay, that's really good. I'm gonna come back to that. Okay, yep.
I was gonna say, like, if you know, like, what God says about you, and if it lines up with, like, everything he loves about you and everything like that.
Right, yeah, those are all really great answers. So here's my thought, Trey. So a super practical thing, let's say that you don't know like hardly any of the Bible at all, and you've never read the Bible, and you're just new to this thing, and you're like, okay, I should probably figure out my thought life though, because you're saying that's super important. Well, yes, congratulations, point A, you've succeeded. Okay, yes, you got to take control of your thought life. But how do you do that? If there is ever a thought that comes into your mind that leaves you with anything that is not of God, then it was not of God. For example, we know that guilt and condemnation are not from God. So that's easy to say, but what Adam just said is also very true. Guilt and condemnation are not from God, but conviction is from the Holy Spirit. So how do you know the difference?
Yeah.
Well, it's actually very simple when you break it down, because conviction leaves you with hope of, man, God doesn't want me to stay this way. There's better for me. There's hope.
Yeah.
Guilt and condemnation says that's who you are and you'll never change. So that's the big difference. If a thought comes into my head and it leaves me with anything other than hope, love, life, joy, grace, patience, if it leaves me with anything other than those things, the gifts, the fruits of the Spirit, if it leaves me with anything that is not that, then there's an immediate red flag where I need to, and this is what the Bible says about take captive every thought and make it obedient to Christ. Well, that's a super Christian thing to say. What in the world does that mean? What that means is you need to take that thought, if it left guilt, condemnation, whatever, and you need to sit that thing down and you need to ask one question. Why are you here? You need to sit that thought down and say, why is that thought in my mind? So if I've been thinking in my mind like, man, I'm just not good enough. I just can't do this. I just can't do this. Obviously, that is not of God, because that's telling me just what I said, like you're not good enough. You'll never change. So why is that thought in my mind? It's because obviously the devil wants me to believe a narrative that will cause me to never reach my full potential. And I will say, if you can do that, you will quickly mature into a very spiritually mature Christian, because that is the battlefield of the spiritual warfare that's going on in your life. If you can take control of your thought life, then every area of your life will begin to be affected by that, because as a man thinks, so he is. Mm-hmm. And if you can change the way you think, you will change your life, for sure. So really, yes, we're talking about we need to deal with our past, but we're dealing with our past because if we don't, we'll never live in freedom, which means that our mind is losing the spiritual battle that's happening over our life. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
All right, we've got less than a minute, so let's make it quick.
Good old Evan McIntyre.
Evan, what's up, Evan? Oh, he's not here. It's so
In
sad.
the chat, dropped an amazing question. He said,
Okay.
Parker, what is the best way to help others through past guilt, even if they aren't Christians?
Oof. Man, tell him about Jesus, bro. You know what I'm
Let's
saying?
hear it.
Man, Evan, great leader, great question. Everybody get up there. Good job. For those of you who don't know, Evan is one of our stud, amazing students that just graduated and left for college. But you boys still repping Wednesday nights. Let's go. Okay, so forgot the question. What was it? I'm so like enamored with Evan.
How do you help others?
How to help others even if they're not Christian deal with
Yeah.
guilt. Okay, gotcha. So I think that the answer is very simple. It's difficult though. The answer is simple, but the act is very difficult. At the end of the day, whether somebody is Christian or not Christian, it does not ever change your calling to that person. You are called to love that person no matter what. So for example, and we'll end with this. Let's say you have somebody that comes to you and they've been struggling for something for a long time. And they've never told anybody. And it's something that they think is just awful, that, God would never want anything to do with them, and maybe that's why they're not a Christian. Whatever the scenario may be, maybe they just bring something to you that, it's just bothering them, and they just, they tell you about it. If your answer is anything that does not reflect the love of Jesus, then it's the wrong answer. If you can communicate to a person, thank you for sharing whatever you just shared, but even in spite of that, I still love you, and I don't see you for your sin or for your actions, but I see you for you, because I see you as a child of God. If that's not what you communicate, then it's wrong. But if you can communicate that well, then I think that's the most effective evangelism you can possibly have. Yeah. I mean, if you communicate to somebody that's been struggling with addiction and all these crazy things that they may have gone through in their entire life, if they just dumped it out all in front of you and they just dumped out all that dirt onto the table and you still sit down and say, let's eat, that's a really good position to be in. And that is somebody who in the future, even if they want nothing to do with God now, they know they can always come to you, and there's something that you have that they want, they just don't know it yet.
Right. Every
time. All right, man, that's some good stuff. Golly. All right, give yourselves a hand. Good job, everybody. Great talk. Anybody who has not, in this room, who has not registered for Oasis Conference that's happening in a little bit over a month, the first, y'all listen to this. We don't do this because we have a lot of money and we're crazy. We do this because we want to show you guys that you're valued, we love you, you belong, and there's a place for you. So we've saved up our whole budget all year so that we could bless you guys. So the first 100 students that register for Oasis Conference, this baby's free. This conference free. We ain't making no money. We losing money, you know what I'm saying? This conference is absolutely free. The first 100 students that register get a backpack, a branded backpack, Oasis backpack, a branded Oasis journal, a branded super nice gel pen, not those clicky pens, I'm talking about that gel cap pen. Now everybody gets a t-shirt, but the first 100 get all that fancy stuff. So you better register online. OasisYouth.tv is the website. OasisYouth.tv. Go register if you haven't already. Everybody that's online, it's in person. It's also a virtual conference, and we will send you all your stuff. So wherever you're at, register for the conference. Thank you guys in person that are here tonight. Thank you for joining in person. Everybody that's joining online, my man Evan.
Let's go.
Thanks for joining, bro. We love you. Everybody tell them we'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Bye.